cute earrings.
Thank you.
You're pretty?
Yeah. All right, tell him.
Tell
Tell him.
Okay. I'm kind of nervous.
Welcome back to the Kathy and Celeste show. Okay.
Okay. Hi guys.
Hi.
Welcome back to our channel, Kathy and Celeste YouTube channel. Today, Kathy's gonna be telling me a story.
Yes, I am.
And yep.
Should
You tell me?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell y'all. Okay. So, have you ever heard of the Bell Witch?
No.
Okay.
Actually, can I just tell them?
Tell them.
The other day, Kathy was writing out a text to somebody and she wrote what it was. But I didn't know what it was. I don't know what it is. Just The Bell Witch, the title.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what that is. Please tell me.
Alrighty, so what caught my eye about this story is that it is one of the oldest legends in America, like ghost stories. And because it's so old, it happened in like the 1800s, there's a lot of different versions of this story. So you probably have heard this story, way different version than what I'm about to tell. It's kind of like playing telephone, you know? You tell it to somebody and then they change something and then change something, so yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun, yeah.
And it's about witches?
You'll see.
Or a witch?
You'll see. And you'll decide. So the majority of my research, I got it from this cool podcast. It's called the Mysterious Radio Podcast, and it's really cool. And the host, she interviews this author named Pat Fitzhugh, and he wrote a book about the Bell Witch. It's called The Bell Witch, The Full Account. And in it, he tried to be like as historically accurate as possible. So he went to courthouses, public record offices. He interviewed descendants of the Bell family, descendants from that settlement, you know? So he really did his homework. Because it's hard to be historically accurate with something so like old, you know, but he did his best. So that's what attracted me to having that be my major source of this. But yeah, in his book, he does quote other books. He quotes Richard Bell, who was one of the Bell kids that wrote about that experience. But he wrote it until much later. And then he also quotes a book by Martin Ingram, who was like a newspaper journalist back in the day. So the story begins in North Carolina. It starts with John and Lucy, and they meet in 1782 in a Baptist church.
Holy cow.
Mm-hmm. This is the part where I was like, I don't know if I should include this.
Oh.
They met in 1782. John was 32. Lucy was 12 when they got married.
They just went to church together?
Yeah, they met at church together and apparently they hit it off because they ended up getting married.
Ew. Later or when she was 12?
No, when she was 12.
Yeah, I think we should leave that in.
Okay. But yeah, so they met and they got married and they ended up having a super successful farm. I think it was like 323 acres. And a lot of the success from that farm could be chalked up to the fact that they owned enslaved people that did a lot of the work for them. As y'all know, slavery was a thing back then and it's very disgusting. And I did hear multiple podcasts about this story while doing my research and a lot of people omitted that part. But I feel like it's important to know because it is part of the story, you know? Yeah, and so they had a farm and they had it for like a few years and they were pretty successful. But John, being the old hag that he was getting a little older.
Old hag?
Yeah.
Old hag?
Yeah. He was getting a little up there, and so he decided to hire what was called an overseer, who would be in charge of like overseeing the farm and overseeing the enslaved people. So he hired him and his name was John Black. And John Black was just a nasty dude, man. He really knew his way around the farm, like he knew a lot about it, so he was able to take care of a lot of things. But he also disagreed a lot with John Bell about like absolutely everything. And so they constantly would be in fights and stuff, you know. He was especially nasty to the enslaved people. When him and John would get in fights, the overseer, he would go and take it out on the enslaved people because they obviously couldn't fight back.
Ew, that's so gross. What the hell?
So he was like really nasty.
Oh.
And then one day, John Bell, he overheard the overseer talking to the enslaved people, and he was just talking about how fine one of John's daughters was. And and he was just like, God, she's so pretty. She's gonna be mine. Da 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 da. At this point, it was John Bell's last straw with this guy. And so he calls John Black, the overseer, into a building, and he just shoots him. And the overseer is just in a puddle of his own blood, dead, boom. And he did face charges because of this, but he ended up getting off with no charges because he claimed that it was self-defense. So, yeah.
I mean, I would do the same. The overseer sounds like a douche face.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, John Bell doesn't really sound any better because he still owned people, which is so weird. Nobody should own anybody. Yeah, so that happened. And then after that, John still needed an overseer to help him around the farm and stuff. And so he hired someone, and the new guy was just as knowledgeable about the farm as the other guy that got murdered. But ever since John killed the guy, his luck went downhill from there. I'm talking a ton of financial problems. Animals on the farm were dying without any cause. The crops were not doing good at all. Ironically enough, the farms by John were flourishing. They were doing so good. Nobody could really explain why the farm was doing so bad, because prior to this, they were being so successful.
Wow.
Yeah, and so for 2 years, their luck just went down. I forgot to mention this, but those two had a total of 8 kids. And the 8 kids were Jesse, John Jr., Drury, Esther, Zadok, Betsy, Richard, and Joel.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's a lot of freaking kids.
That's a lot of children. So they're stressed out because they're not having very good luck on the farm. They had some friends that moved to Tennessee. And one of those friends was Elias Fort. And he would write them letters. And he was like, dude, you have to see Tennessee. It's super green. Here's a picture of the Red River in Tennessee by where they moved. Look at that.
God.
Isn't that gorgeous?
Wow. That is stunning.
Yeah, so Elias would write to them and he was like, dude, you should come check it out. And shortly after Elias Fort moved down there, he started this his own Baptist church with 2 other dudes, and it was called the Red River Baptist Church. And so Lucy and Belle were like, let's just move there. Obviously, we could start a new life. The land is super fertile. We can go and have a new life there, you know?
Yeah.
And so the winter of 1803, they decided to just move there. So they sold their farm in North Carolina, and they settled on what is now Robertson County, Tennessee.
Did they take all their kids?
Yeah, and at the time, they didn't have all those kids. I think they just had like 3 or 4.
Oh.
Yeah. So they go, and they purchased 220 acres of land on that settlement, and there was a handful of families that also lived on that settlement. It was like a super religious little community. They would sing church hymns and stuff together. They were very like...
close-knit.
Yeah, very close-knit community. And they went to the Red River Baptist Church because Elias Fort was the dude there that started it, you know?
Yeah.
And so John ended up being an elder in the church. The whole family was very respected, a very prominent part of the community. Cut to 1817, and John is getting up there. He's like 67 by now. Again, he still owned enslaved people who did a lot of the work, but even so, you could find him out in the field doing work from like sun up to sundown, you know? Oh. And so one day he's out there just, you know, doing farming stuff, and he sees this black animal with the body of a dog and a face of a bunny. I photoshopped this picture here to help y'all with a mental image. It was meant to be scary.
I mean, I would be freaked out if I saw that, even if it looked like that.
Yeah, I photoshopped it myself.
Ooh, so we're not getting copyrighted?
No, we're not. Yeah, and so he sees this animal and he's like, what the frick? And so he goes, and when he goes to, he goes and he shoots it, it disappears. And I'm not saying it ran away or run really fast or anything. It straight up vanishes in front of his eyes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No.
No. But keep in mind, y'all, he was 67 at this point. So he was like, you know what? Maybe I'm just getting up there. Like, whatever. So he like just ignored it and he went on with his day. And then a few weeks after that, one of his sons, Drury, he had a similar encounter, except he saw a bird. And he said that the bird was like bigger than an eagle and bigger than a turkey. Just a huge flippin' bird.
What the heck?
Yeah. And when Drury reached over to his gun to go shoot it, same thing. It flew away. Yeah. It flew away. And
I'd be like, all right, guys.
Yeah.
I think it's time to go.
Exactly. And then a few weeks after that, 2 of the kids, Betsy and Richard, they were playing by the pear orchard. This was like a huge farm. So yeah, they had a pear orchard and they were out there just playing around, being children, when out of nowhere they see this old, feeble looking woman like behind some of the trees. And she looks lost, kind of like out of it. And so they're like, hello. Like, hey, hey. They were like, can I help you? They introduced themselves, you know, and they were like, let's try to, like, they were asking her, like, where do you live, you know, to try to get her home. And as soon as they started walking towards her, she walked behind a tree and she never came out of the other side. And they walked over, they circled all around the pear orchard, nothing. They couldn't see this old woman. And they were both like, and this was a huge farm, so it's not like a bunch of houses stuck together. It's like a huge piece of property, you know? But this was just the beginning, y'all. At this point, the family wasn't concerned yet.
Oh my gosh. It's like you guys should be concerned.
Exactly. Oh, don't you worry though. A few weeks after that is when everything kind of started. So they lived in a cabin and they would hear thumping and like banging on the walls.
What the hell?
And whenever they went outside to see what was causing it, there was nothing there.
What?
And this would happen every night, and every night it got increasingly louder and more intense, and the family was just getting more and more agitated.
That's so scary.
I know.
Oh.
And so John, he had his sons stay out there during the night to try to see. Because at first they were like, what if it's just some kid playing a prank on us? Granted, they would have to walk a long way from wherever they live.
And dressed like an old woman.
Yeah. So the kids would stay out there, and they never ever saw anybody running up to the house or anything that could explain what that noise was.
Oh, that's so freaky.
I know.
That has got to be one of my worst fears. Being on a farm. I would think that most farms are just clear out in the middle of nowhere, and some freaky stuff is going on that you can't explain.
Yeah, who do you call? If you do call for someone to come help, it's going to take a minute, especially when there weren't any cars.
No phones.
No phones?
Right?
What, you're going to write a letter to someone?
But I know.
Yeah.
Help
me. Super stressful. And then at one point, they heard what it sounded like chains being dragged on top of the roof. And, can you imagine? That's so freaky.
That's so scary.
I know. So that happened. But then it got personal.
Oh, no.
Then Betsy and a few of the other kids, they would be in bed, they were all tucked in with their covers over their bodies, and somebody would slowly be grabbing their blanket like this, or they would tug on it. And it kept happening every single night, and the kids would be crying because it's like, that's scary,
That's
so the kids
so scary.
Yeah, and so the kids would start crying and screaming, and the parents would run up. Betsy or Lucy and John would run up with their little candle because there's no electricity, and they would come in, and there's nothing there. And at first they were like, maybe it's one of the older kids messing with like the younger kids, so they would check. Nothing. They never found any evidence of who was doing this.
Oh my God.
And at this time, Betsy was 11 when all of this started happening.
The daughter?
One of the daughters, yeah. And it kept happening night after night. And so eventually she came up with a plan. She was like, tomorrow night or whatever, the next time that happens, and somebody is pulling on my covers, I'm going to yank it really hard. And that way, whoever's on the other side is going to stumble out, and then we're going to know who it is, right? That makes sense. That's a great plan for a little 11-year-old.
That's so scary.
I know, it's scary.
She's brave.
That's brave.
I would not do that.
No, I would be like, let's move. Let's burn the house and move.
At that point, guys, come on. It's like, how many things have to happen before you guys leave?
Oh, just you wait, my guy.
Oh my gosh.
And so the night comes, and lo and behold, somebody is yanking on her blanket. And so she yanks it back, but there's no resistance. Nobody's holding on to it or anything. And so she's like, what the heck? And as soon as that happens, as soon as she yanks it back, she feels a hard slap on her face. It makes a noise. And she was like, ow! And then her parents ran in, and they were like, whoa, what happened? And they didn't see anything, but she had welts all over her face. It looked like some invisible hand smacked her. So that happened.
Oh my gosh.
And at this point, the family realizes that they're dealing with something beyond their control and beyond their understanding.
Oh, that's so scary.
Yeah. And one of the kids, Richard Bell, documented all of this, but until much later. This started happening in 1817, and he wrote about it in 1846 in a book called Our Family Trouble. Oh, just so y'all know. I didn't read it, but if you want to read it, totally go for it. So this kept happening night after night. It would mess with them a lot, the noises. It would mess with Betsy a lot, especially. It would yank her hair, it would hit her, it would put her in trances.
What the hell?
Yeah. The family endured this for a while, and John told the family not to tell anyone. He swore the whole family to secrecy because this was only 125 years after the Salem witch trials happened. And he was such a prominent member of the Baptist church that he was like, I don't want anybody hanging me or setting me on fire. So they endured it for as long as they could. But the secret didn't last too long because the family got very little sleep at night. And so at church and just in the community, they had bags under their eyes. Their attention span wasn't that good.
Yeah.
Like they were just kind of out of it. And so they realized they had to do something because it wasn't sustainable living like that, just straight up not getting any sleep,
Yeah.
So John decided to tell his trusty best friend and neighbor James Johnston.
Oh my gosh. Why do I feel like we can't trust James?
Oh, you'll see. So he tells James and sits him down, tells him everything, and James is like, you know what? I think it's one of your kids messing with you. I think that because you're getting older, I think it's just one of the kids playing a prank on you. But I can tell that this is stressing you out, so I'm going to come over nonetheless and just try to help you figure it out. And so that night, James Johnston comes over to spend the night. And he does a whole spiel. Like, he gives a sermon, they sing hymns, they do prayers and everything. And then I'm guessing he stayed in the guest room because he had his own bed. That night, when everybody went to bed and he went to bed, his bed started vibrating violently. Yeah. So he jumped right out of bed and he yelled out. He said, "In the name of the Lord, who are you and what do you want? Why are you here?" And he didn't get an answer, but the activity stopped. Nothing happened after that. Yeah.
Oh.
And then the next morning, he tells the family, "I think y'all are dealing with something sinister," which is like, oh my God, James, you're so brilliant for coming to that conclusion.
Obviously, James.
Obviously,
Thank you so much.
So he's like, dude, I think you need to tell the Reverend. John obviously is kind of against it, you know, but he's like, you know what? I need to do something. So yeah, I'm down. And so the next day they go to tell Reverend Fort about this. And surprisingly, Reverend Fort was super understanding about this. And he was like, damn, that sucks, dude. I'll help you out.
Damn, that sucks.
He was like, I'll help you out however I can, you know. And so he like, goes and prays and stuff, and it doesn't do anything. The activity just keeps happening. I wrote, he prayed a ton for them and sent them good vibes to try to get rid of it, but to no avail.
But to no avail.
Word got out of this paranormal thing happening in the house, and this was in Tennessee. And so people from all over Tennessee, people from Kentucky, they would come over to the Bell house to like try to help them out. And at first, a lot of people think that the Bells did this for attention or for money, but they housed all of these people. They fed them and housed them, and they actually denied any money. Like, anytime anybody tried to give them money, they didn't take it. And so it wasn't for the money that they were doing this, you know?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. They owned all the farms and stuff. Why would they want attention?
Yeah, exactly. When people came to visit, there was a lot of activity. Kids would be smacked. There was a lot of banging around. Yeah, there was a lot of activity. And it seemed that the entity grew the more attention it was given. You know, the more fear there was, it seemed to feed on it because it just got stronger and stronger.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And as things grew, they would hear whispers occasionally. They couldn't make out the words, but it sounded kind of like a feeble old lady trying desperately to say something.
Ooh.
Yeah. And over time, it developed into a voice. And when it was calm or mellow, the entity, it sounded like musical notes being played, like a cello. And when it was excited or mad, it sounded like a shrill voice.
Ooh.
So that's kind of interesting.
That's so creepy.
Yeah. So the thing could answer in knocks. So it's like if you asked it an answer that you could give in numbers, you know, it would answer in knocks.
If you were like, how many people are in this room, it would be like
1, 2, 3. Yeah, exactly.
1, 2.
And it would be accurate.
Oh my gosh, that's so creepy.
Yeah. And people would ask this thing. They were like, what do you want? Why are you here? Who are you? And every time it would give a contradicting answer. Once it claimed to be the spirit of someone who was buried nearby that was looking for their lost tooth. There's no historical record about this, but one of the podcasts that I was listening to said that one of the Bell kids was kicking around a skull. There were a lot of Native American graves nearby by that area, and apparently one of the kids found a skull and they were kicking it around, and one of the tooths fell out. And so the children went to find that tooth, and they spent all day looking for it, and they found it, and they brought it back. And apparently the entity just started laughing and was like, I was just kidding. That's not actually me.
Oh, that's so creepy.
I know. Obviously that can't be verified, but it's still a creepy thing.
Yeah.
And then another time the thing claimed to be James Johnston's great-grandmother.
What the?
Another time it claimed to be a spirit of someone that hid a treasure nearby that wanted Betsy to find it. It changed its story a lot. This thing really enjoyed telling people about like people's past. So if there was someone there during the time that a lot of people visited, if there was somebody that had a questionable past, the thing loved to broadcast it to the whole room. For example, there was this one guy that supposedly stole a sheepskin from another man, and how he eloped with someone else's wife. The thing told the whole room about that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's like a chismosa ghost.
Yeah, chismosa ghost, yeah. The activity was mostly confined to the Bell property, but eventually it started going out past that. And this whole time, Betsy was getting just the brunt of it. She was getting slapped around. She was being put in trances. Like, her hair was being pulled, stuff like that. So one night, she was like, I want to get away from this.
Yeah.
And so she asked James Johnston if she could spend the night, and he was like, yeah, dude. And so she went over there, and at the time, him and his wife had just had a baby, and so there was a newborn baby there. Everything was fine. She went over. She was getting ready to fall asleep when out of nowhere, they hear the baby crying. And so James Johnson and his wife run over with their little candles to see why the baby's crying, and the baby had red marks all over it. And it was just screaming hysterically. And allegedly, right after they saw the baby, a voice said, well, that little baby will never cry again.
Is that demonic voice? Or is it just like a creepy little voice?
There wasn't any specifics. I think it was just a disembodied, creepy voice that came through. So that happened. And then there were 2 separate priests or pastors that came to visit the house at the same time at one point. And both of them, interestingly enough, had given a sermon at separate churches at 11 a.m. Both of them. Same day at 11 a.m., right? And then they both came and visited. The Thing started quoting each of their sermons verbatim. And they were like, how could you possibly know what I said during my sermon? Because it was like word for word. Ooh. And so that's when people realized that this thing had the ability to be at 2 places at once.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Isn't that so eerie?
Oh, that's so creepy.
Yeah. And yeah, at this point, the activity is spreading around the settlement. It seemed that the activity happened within a 6-mile radius of the Bell farm, no further than that. So it happened in churches and people's houses of the settlement and stuff like that. Oh. Some people even experience activity today on that land.
What?
But like I said, there's so many different versions of this story that it's hard to really know the truth. This is all speculation. Even with Pat's intensive research, this is all just speculation.
Yeah.
You know? At one point, President Andrew Jackson came to visit the home.
What?
And there were 2 different scenarios, possible scenarios as to why this came to be.
Yeah.
So at the time, he was a general in a war. I didn't specify which one. Yeah. Andrew Jackson in 1812. And 3 of John's sons, Jesse, John Jr., and Drury, they all fought for General Jackson at Horseshoe Bend.
Was he the president yet, or he was just a general?
I don't know. But they were all from Tennessee, Andrew and the kids, and so it's possible that they could have connected because of that. And then another possibility is that Andrew Jackson owned land 2 miles away from the Bell farm. He didn't live there, but he owned land there, and so he had to drive by in his little buggy to leave by the farm. And so it's possible that he could have gotten to know the family through that. We can't really verify why he was there, you know?
Wow.
So some people say that he brought a witch slayer with him, Andrew. And apparently the witch slayer was being like super boastful and was like, if I see the witch, I'm gonna shoot her, and and so apparently the witch beat the witch slayer up and kicked him, quote,
the witch beat the witch slayer up?
Yeah, and kicking him, quote, in the posterior region and shoved him out the front door. And apparently Andrew got a kick out of it. Martin Ingram, that also wrote a book about this, says that Andrew was delighted and amused with the whole thing, saying, quote, this beats fighting the British. Apparently, after he beat up the witch slayer, the entity told Andrew, he was like, he's a fake, he's not a real witch slayer, and also there's another fraud on your team, because he brought like a group of men with him. And so at this point, his whole team was freaked out. They were just like, I want to leave. But Andrew was like, no, let's stay, because I want to know what other fake bitch is here, you know?
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
Andrew,
I know. But apparently he got spooked because he was seen leaving the property early at dawn the next morning.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's all talk, isn't he?
So this spirit, this entity, constantly told different things of what it was, what it wanted, you know? But at some point, he said that he was Kate Batts. And that seemed to stick because from then on, people referred to the entity as Kate, and it would answer to Kate.
Kate Batts?
Kate Batts. Who was Kate Batts?
Yeah.
I'll answer that.
Oh,
so
okay.
She was this older lady that lived up the road. Her husband was disabled, so her and her children were the ones that would take care of the farm, and she would just kind of do anything she could to make the ends meet. And she had a reputation in the settlement for being an odd lady. She collected brass pins. She took this mule literally everywhere she went. She took him everywhere she went, and he even had a saddle on him, but she never rode him.
What the heck?
Your eyeshadow looks really cool, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So she was alive and the entity was...
claiming that it was her, yeah.
Huh.
But people, apparently it was a sin to be odd back then because people were like, oh yeah, she's weird, that pans out, it's her. Even though she was literally alive. She outlived John by 23 years. So.
Whoa. Were they the same age?
No.
Oh.
A rumor was going around that John effed over Kate with a business deal, and so that's why she came back to haunt him. He never even did a deal with her. He did a deal with one of her distant relatives, and they ended up settling on the deal in the favor of the bat's relative. So John didn't even get anything out of that. And like I said, Kate outlived John for 23 years. So obviously it wasn't her. But nonetheless, the name stuck. The entity answered to Kate, and I'll probably refer to it as Kate because it's easier.
Can I use some glitter, please? That one? This one? Yeah. Thank you.
After a while, the entity would say a lot, I want to kill John Bell, I want to kill John Bell. And so people were like, why do you want to kill John Bell? The entity would say John Bell's a bad man. But the entity would say that a lot of men were bad men. But the difference was that the entity only ever said that it wanted to kill John. And she never said why. She only would just always say that she wanted to kill him.
What the heck?
And so at this point, the family sits down one night and they're like, you know what? Why don't we just move? Why don't we go somewhere?
Finally.
Like, exactly. It's like about time.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so they're like, why don't we just move? This is too stressful. Ba-da-da-da. And apparently, as they were talking about it as a family, this disembodied voice came on and said, you could stay here or you could go to the end of the earth. I'm in the air you breathe. I'm in the water you drink. You will never, ever escape me. And so they didn't move because they were like, well, guess that says that. You know, it's like they didn't even try. Yeah. It's like you're going to take the word of an entity that going by Kate Batts. So after a while, John started to get really sick. He had trouble keeping a little bit of food and water down. Oh. He said that he felt like there was a stick in between his cheeks.
Oh, geez,
and
that sounds horrible.
Yeah, and he just kept getting sicker and sicker. He also said that he would have shaking spells. He would have like nervous twitches. Back in the day, that was considered paranormal, spooky. Wow. Today, we would consider that issues with the nervous system. So it would obviously be dealt with differently.
Yeah, like anxiety or something.
Yeah. Apparently, Kate really loved to take credit for John's pain and illnesses and stuff. By this time, Betsy had gotten a little older because this was a few years later. I think she was like in her mid-teens. She was older and she met this guy. His name was Joshua Gardner. And they fell in love and it was really cute. It's two rich white people. They had a lot in common, you know? So it's like... And everybody was for it. Everybody saw how happy he made her. So they got engaged and everybody was like, hell yes. Except one person. And can you guess who it was that wasn't happy about it? Kate.
Oh, I thought you were going to say her dad.
No.
He seems kind of weird.
Yeah. No, it was Kate.
Okay.
Apparently, the voice would tell her, no, you can't marry him. That would be the biggest mistake ever. Don't do it. But nothing worse happened while she was telling her that. Kate was still experiencing a lot of harassment from this entity. She was still getting her hair pulled, getting slapped around, being put in trances, being woken up. But nothing worse was happening. So at this point, she was like, I'll deal with it, whatever. At this point, Kate's main focus was John, because John was just getting progressively worse. He was just getting sicker and sicker. He couldn't even go out into the fields to check out what was going on with his farm without falling down.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, there wasn't much that he could do. Eventually, he started getting seizures. And then in about December of 1820, he had a really bad seizure that resulted in a coma. And then the next morning in bed, he died.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
His whole family was surrounding his deathbed, and as they sat down grieving, one of the kids, John Jr., he noticed a strange little dark vial in his medicine cabinet. He noticed that it was strange because it wasn't one of the vials that the doctor had left for John. And so he was like... And I don't understand the following series of events that happened. The next logical thing in their brain was, I found this weird little liquid. Let me pour it. As they found it, the family cat was walking by. And so they decided to pour a couple drops of it into the family cat's mouth. No. And I think you can guess what happened to the kitty.
Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just assume it's poison?
So immediately after the cat passed away, they heard a voice, the voice of Kate, laughing and screeching. And it said, old Jack Bell is gone now. I gave him a big dose of that stuff last night and that's what fixed it.
She's so intense.
And so obviously the family was like super upset and they held this funeral for John. It was one of the biggest funerals that Robertson County had ever seen.
Oh, wow.
And apparently throughout the whole funeral service, they heard Kate's voice and it sang something like, row me up a big bottle of brandy-o. Super cheerful, super creepy, literally during the whole time during the funeral it was saying this. And some people said that she even sounded drunk. But after his burial, the activity slowed down significantly. There still was some activity, but it slowed down a lot. So winter passed and then Easter came. It was getting warmer and warmer, and a lot of people in the settlement were having a picnic by the river. Super chill sunny day, and enjoying it. And Betsy Bell and Joshua Gardner, they were going down to the river when suddenly Betsy hears a familiar voice screaming.
Oh no.
And in her ear it says, "Betsy, don't marry Joshua. You can't marry Joshua Gardner. Don't do it." But only Betsy could hear it. There was a ton of people from the settlement having a picnic, but only Betsy could hear it. So at this point, she was like, you know what? I really love Joshua, but I saw what Kate did to my dad, and she was just traumatized. She was just like, I can't handle losing another person to Kate, Yeah. And so she ended up breaking up the engagement.
Oh, no. That's sad.
I know.
She was, like, in love with him.
Yeah, they really loved each other. But I think she sacrificed it for his sake,
Yeah, for his safety.
Yeah.
What a creep. I wonder why Kate was so obsessed with this little girl the whole time.
I'll give y'all my theories. And so that happened, and then Kate said goodbye to the Bell family. She was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna leave you alone. All right, for 7 years. And she said, but I'll be back after that. For 7 years, there was zero activity, nothing from Kate. And then 7 years to the dot, on 1828, Kate returned. But this time, she decided to visit John Jr. And John Jr. was the only one in the family that wasn't super scared of her. Anytime there was activity, anytime it started to mess with Betsy, he would get up and be like, "Leave my family alone, you freak!" People think that Kate developed a sense of respect for John Jr. because he was the only one that wasn't scared. Per different accounts, they had a lot of conversations the next 3 nights about the past, present, and future and civilizations. Apparently, she predicted all this stuff, and John Jr. ended up documenting much of those conversations and passed it down to different family members. There's obviously no way of validating these documents to prove that it was his own handwriting. They could have been forged. There are documents that say this, but there's no way of proving that it was his handwriting,
Yeah.
So there's that. And then she was like, all right, I'm bidding you farewell. I'm gonna leave you guys alone, but then I'll be returning in 107 years.
Which would be when?
So that would be 1935. There's mixed opinions. Some people say that she came back to haunt the next closest, most living relative, but nobody wrote anything about it or anything, so there's no way to prove that.
Oh.
And some people think that she left, and then a lot of people think that she never left the settlement, that because there's been a lot of activity from then until now. There's been a lot of activity there, so a lot of people think that she never left. Now we're gonna get onto the theories. The first theory is that this was all a making of Richard Powell. Who was Richard Powell? Richard Powell was... So Betsy, when she was 11, she had a school teacher who was Richard Powell. And he would always tell the parents, oh, Betsy's so beautiful. She's developing so beautifully. She's going to make a great wife one day. He showed a lot of creepy interest in her. And a lot of the family members didn't think twice about this, but John was super creeped out.
Which is weird because his wife was 12.
In 1824, almost 3 years after Betsy left the family home, which I think by then she must have been like maybe 20. I don't know. She was older.
You're asking the wrong guy.
Yeah. But yeah, in 1824, almost 3 years after Betsy left the family home, Richard Powell and Betsy got married.
No.
This dude, he was very educated. He was socially respected. He was a member of the Tennessee State Legislature. Historical records have proven that he did study the occult and that he did know a lot of different languages. And so it's interesting because Kate Batts, her number one motive was to get rid of John. John was the only one that was opposing Richard marrying little Betsy, So that makes sense that that would be him. And then motive number 2, you guys remember how Kate was super against Betsy marrying Joshua?
Right.
Why?
Ew.
You know what I mean?
And that would make sense also why Betsy was being targeted the whole time.
Exactly. So they ended up getting married, and then he had a stroke. And then for 11 years, he super suffered because of the stroke, and then he died. And
well, that's good.
Yeah. He died in 1948, and Betsy, she never remarried. She just moved in with one of her daughters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the theories, that it was actually Richard Powell that was messing with the family this entire time. Entirely plausible. Another theory is that it was a poltergeist. And at first that would make sense because the entity took form of different supernatural entities over its life cycle. And it did begin as a poltergeist, you know, like banging around, a lot of noises, violent attacks, stuff like that. Typical poltergeist stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if y'all remember, it was able to give answers in numerical knocks and stuff, in knocks. And it was also able to quote verbatim from like the Bible, quote different sermons. So it had intelligence. So that disproves the idea that it could have been a poltergeist because of the intelligence that it portrayed.
Oh.
Another theory is that it was a demonic possession because it messed with Betsy so much, you know, because of the trances, hurting her, stuff like that. Some people think that it's possible that that's what it could have been. And then another possibility, Pat did talk to a lot of different people. He talked to a lot of Native American people, and some Native American people said that this sounded like what could be a shapeshifter or a trickster. Oh. So that's another theory. It's an endless possibility of what this thing actually could have been, you know?
So is Pat someone from right now, or was he...
Yeah, he's still alive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's still alive. He's an adult.
Okay.
So yeah, on the Bell property, there's a cave. And the Bell family would use it for storage. It stayed 78 degrees year round. And so they would use it for cold storage.
Like a little refrigerator, a little natural refrigerator. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of activity there. I visited it. There was a lot of activity. He had tapping on his shoulders. He heard noises, stuff like that.
Wow, we should go there. Well,
let me tell you about that. So there's been a lot of paranormal activity reported in that area. You know that famous ghost hunter dude, the one with the place in Vegas?
Yeah, Zach Bagans.
Yeah, he went out there. Discovery Channel went out there, and apparently there's a lot of activity there. And Pat has been to the cave, but he never did like a formal investigation. And there are a lot of Native American graves on top of the area where the cave is. So there's a lot of graves there. Pat said that there's a lot of psychics that have reached out to him since then, just about that area. And a lot of psychics say that they've experienced activity there. There's been a few that they were like, I can't feel anything. But he said that there was one psychic that was like, I didn't really want to look into it any further. It felt really malevolent, way creepier than anything that was reported by the Bell family. It just felt super ancient and super evil. And I just felt like I had to get out of there.
Oh my gosh, that's creepy.
Yeah. A lot of people wonder, is the house still standing? What is left of the Bell property? There's only 2 surviving structures, an old log cabin that could have been a quarter for enslaved people to stay. Oh. And there's a house across the Red River from the Bell farm where Drury lived after the whole spiel happened. That's the one that's still standing. So it's like that one and that one. The original Bell home was destroyed long ago, and John Jr.'s house was burned to the ground in the 1940s.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Today, you can go to the Bell Witch Cave, and you can get a tour there. And they also built a reenactment of the Bell cabin, along with a bunch of historical information. And so I thought that would be cool, like go look around and get the tour and everything.
Yes.
But yeah, that is the story of the Bell Witch. Spooky. And when I was studying this, I get scared so easily, y'all. And I swear, I was so scared. I was like, oh my God, is the Bell Witch gonna come haunt me? Luckily, she didn't.
That was an amazing story.
Thank you. I hope you liked it. I hope you were entertained.
Should we finish our makeup and then?
We should finish our makeup and then come back.
Fast forward and then come back. Okay, we'll be back.
All right.
Thank you for watching our video. If you liked it, don't forget to like it and subscribe. And these are our dogs. We love them and they love you. So
yeah, they're very handsome. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day.
Thank you for watching, guys. Have a good day. Bye.